Hello guys, welcome to episode 3 of I Just Watched, and today we're going to be talking about Are You Afraid of the Dark 2019. Here's a history of the show. Are You Afraid of the Dark originally aired on Nickelodeon from October 31st, Halloween 1990 to April 20th, 1996. Then it was revived from February 6, 1999 to June 11th, 2000. The basic concept was a group of kids known as the Midnight Society who would get together in the woods and tell various scary stories, like the tale of Laughing in the Dark and the tale of the Twisted Claw, two of my favorites. Basically, it was a kid's version of The Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and it was awesome. We didn't know much about the Midnight Society. We just knew that they were a group of kids that loved scary stories. We didn't know who they were, although I do know that one of them was named Greg. Or not Craig, Gary. I remember him. He had glasses. But every episode basically would start with them already in the woods telling a story where they would go, I submit for the approval of the Midnight Society, the tale of the Twisted Claw. Several celebrities before they were stars guest starred on Are You Afraid of the Dark, like Ryan Gosling, Tia and Tamara Mowry, Melissa Joan Hart, and many more. Basically, Are You Afraid of the Dark often competed with R.L. Stine's Goosebumps, that also aired on the Fox Family Channel, now Freeform. And no, when I say R.L. Stine's Goosebumps, I don't mean the Jack Black version, I mean the television show. Ask your parents or Google it. Anyway, Are You Afraid of the Dark was one of my favorite shows growing up. It was fantastically written and done really well. And some of the stories were really scary, and some of them were not, but the opening theme was possibly the scariest thing. I had no idea that they were bringing it back. And once I heard that it was back on, I thought, yay, that's interesting. Because they had started showing it on reruns on Pluto TV, which I was enjoying immensely. So when I heard that it was on Nickelodeon again, of course, I had to watch it. And I was beyond disappointed. Now that you know the history of the show, let's dive into the new incantation. Revivals nowadays are a dime a dozen, and some of them can be good, like Raven's Home and Fuller House. Continuings of a show that worked back then and works now. And other revivals, like if you have listened to my review of the Beverly Hills 90210 reality-based revival thing, then you would know that some of them are not all that great. This, unfortunately, is one of them. Let's dive in. Okay, so the episode starts off with a girl in what seems like a watered-down version of A Nightmare on Elm Street, as she fumbles around a boiler room running away from some man in a top hat. There's even a point where the guy takes his cane and rubs it against the landing, kind of like Freddy would do with his butter knives. But she wakes up and it's a dream. And we're introduced to Rachel. She's new to town, and She ends up going to school. She meets Adam, a socially awkward kid who tries to talk to her, but is not very good at talking, which we've all been there in school, no matter what grade. He tries to open her locker, but is unable to help her. She ends up eating lunch with him. In her first class, science class, she meets Gavin, who's wearing a shirt that says, "Watch horror movies." She asks him about it, and he says, "I'm raising awareness." And it's like, Gavin, everyone watches horror movies. There's not one person that doesn't. That's people who don't like them, but that's fine. People cannot like horror movies. And when she realizes he likes horror movies, she says, "Have you seen The Changeling?" Which, of all the horror movies they could have referenced, for some odd reason they decide to reference that one of all the horror movies in the world. Instead of paying attention to what the teacher's saying, she decides to draw, and she draws the man from her nightmare, whom she calls Mr. Top Hat. She then throws the drawing away, and Gavin fishes it out of the garbage, despite being OCD and basically washing his hands every 5 seconds when we're introduced to him with hand sanitizer. So, he ends up showing the drawing to his friends, and after that, Rachel begins getting random letters in her locker to join the Midnight Society. She has to answer a series of questions. Would you rather spend the night in a haunted house or spend the night in a graveyard? Stuff like that. She answers all of them and then is told to go into the woods by the Midnight Society. And they decide to scare the shit out of her with tiki torch lit on fire and masks and everything. And let me tell you something. In the original show, whenever a new person would come in to the Midnight Society, they would just basically put a blindfold on them and leave them there, and they would have to tell a story, and that's how they would get in. Not this creepy mask shit. I mean, it made absolutely no sense. It's like, let's scare the girl to death. I mean, would you want to join that? And honestly, the whole kids wearing masks thing, it wasn't great in Castle Rock. It wasn't good in the stupid Pet Sematary remake. And it's not good in this. This is a trend the world does not need. Believe me. So they tell her through the masks that she has to come up with a scary story in a day and present it to the Midnight Society. Within a day, she decides to use inspiration from her dream and create a story with Mr. Top Hat. She then goes to the woods and they start. They use the words from the original. I submit for the approval of the Midnight Society the tale of Mr. Top Hat and the Carnival of Doom. Now, we finally get to the story, and like I said before, the episodes were formatted to where they were already there, ready to tell the story. You didn't care where they went to school. You didn't care where they went, who their parents were, or who their friends were, or anything. What you tuned in for, at least what I tuned in for, was the stories. I loved these episodes growing up. This was like how I was introduced to horror, aside from marathons of Friday the 13th on AMC. But the point is that that's what you tuned in for, were the stories. You didn't care about anything else. Their life. I mean, I don't even know half of the original Midnight Society's names, because what I came for was the stories. So, the story that Rachel submits goes as follows. They take a girl to the Carnival of Doom who loves to be scared. And at first she thinks we see that a clown who's taking tickets has no eyes behind his glasses. When she makes him show his eyes to her parents, his eyes are perfectly fine. Then we finally get introduced to Mr. Top Hat, our main villain. And he's as scary as a tissue. And a tissue is not scary, so you pretty much have a idea of what I'm getting at. He comes out on stage and assures the audience that everything they see is part of the show. The lights go out, he disappears, and appears behind the girl who likes to be scared. And basically reassures her that everything is part of the show. She tells her parents she has to go to the bathroom and runs into Mr. Top Hat in the dark. He's sitting on a chair in the middle of the dark, eating scorpions. I wanted that to sink in for a minute. Yes, you heard me right. He is sitting on a chair in the dark, eating CGI scorpions. Not that I expected them to have an actor actually eat scorpions. And does the show explain why he's eating scorpions? Does Rachel explain why he's eating scorpions? No. He just is. He's just eating scorpions. And when he eats them, a bunch of them come out of his arms. And the girl goes, Mr. Top Hat, is this part of the show? And he goes, what's the matter, girl? I thought you liked to be scared. And, yeah, I don't get it. So then she runs into two mean girls at her school, and she tries to tell them what Mr. Top Hat is doing, and they don't believe her, and they go that way, and they disappear. And the next day, the girl notices the picture of the two girls on TV and says, they were at the carnival last night that we went to. And the parents are like, what carnival? And the parents don't remember, and eventually the girl forgets too, and she forgets about Mr. Top Hat and everything as well. And that's the story. That is the most boring ass story I've ever heard. All of the original Midnight Societies would not have let her in. I'm telling you. And if I was in charge of it, I wouldn't let her in. Also, it's also noteworthy to note that the mother of this girl is perky as hell, and then when she sees the boy next door, is like, oh my god, he's so cute. He could be the romantic lead in like all those romantic comedies. Yeah, she's that kind of mother. And he turns out to be one of the people of the Midnight Society. After she tells the story, they end up taking their masks off and revealing all of them, even though she only knows like two of them, the boy that lives next door and Gavin. She's disappointed to find out that Adam's not in the Midnight Society, and decides to try to get him into the Midnight Society, and Mr. Top Hat might not be just a person in her dreams, and might not just be inspiration for a story, and that was at the point where I decided, I'm tuning out. Because, honestly and truly, you guys, like I said before, Are You Afraid of the Dark was as simple as it could possibly be. Basically, they told a story, the episode focused entirely on that story, and then it ended, they put the fire out and went home, and that was it. None of the people that they talked about, none of the villains like the clown in Laughing in the Dark, or any other episodes ever was in the real world beyond the telling of the story. It is beyond ridiculous that they took something that had the simplest of a concept and basically turned it into crap. Decided to not only take something that a lot of 90s kids like me grew up with and loved and destroys it in a matter of seconds. It's just so terrible. And if you want to watch this episode, the first episode, as far as I know, it is still free to watch on YouTube, on Nickelodeon's YouTube channel. I'm sure it's still available, I'm not sure. And it's a 3-part thing. It's a 3-part little sort of miniseries. And honestly, if it the saying that comes to my mind, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. If something worked and lasted as long as it did, from 1990 to 1996 to 1999 to 2000, if it worked, then why mess with it? Why change it? I mean, of course, people have been known to say in reviews for things, oh, they're doing the same thing. Who wants to see the same thing? I wouldn't have minded seeing the same thing. It worked. It was great. I mean, we don't care about Mr. Top Hat. And the fact that we spent the majority of the time getting to know only half of the Midnight Society and not focused entirely on the story aspect, which is what it was. It was a horror anthology series, which they told a different story every week, and you didn't have to watch the episode previous to know, unless it was like a 2-part episode or a 3-part episode, which was a rare occurrence. I'm not going to tell you not to watch it, like I said in my last episode of Uncanny Annie / New Year, New You. I'm not going to be that kind of reviewer that says don't watch this. But I'm going to warn you that if you do watch this, you're going to want to go looking for episodes. You're going to want to go and buy every single season of the original Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because of how terrible this new concept is. And it's like, it's terrible. I was disappointed. Like, I stopped watching it before the episode even ended. The fact that they implied that Mr. Top Hat is actually real and out in the real world, and it's not just in her dreams and in a story she made up, I was like, this is stupid. I'm not gonna tune in for this because I don't care. The story that she made up with him was stupid enough. And the introduction of the villain was dumb as hell. Sorry, refrigerator running. So it's like I didn't want to tune in. But I went on YouTube and I ended up finding somebody posted all the episodes from season 1 in one setting, which was like 5 hours long. And I watched like 3 episodes and was so happy and ended up commenting that I had to find this because the new one sucked. And we got a discussion going about how classic the original was and what it meant to all of us. And it was just great. And I plan on someday getting all the seasons of the original. Because now this made me appreciate how good the original show was and how much I missed it. And how I remember certain episodes when they aired and other episodes I don't. Because when the show originally aired, I was not even... I would have been 1 year old December of 1990. So on Halloween of 1990, I was not even 1 year old yet. So I didn't watch it. And by the time I was 5 is when it was still on, which was 1995. And it ended a year later when I was 6. So, and then by the time it ended in 2000, I was 10. Or 11. No, I was 10. So, and I appreciated the show. I loved it. I loved the horror and the opening. The opening used to scare the crap out of me as a kid. The opening was like the worst part, and some of the stories was scary, like the Tale of Laughing in the Dark was really scary when I was a kid. Seeing it as an adult, although now it's not all that scary, but as a kid, oh my god, was that scary. That episode was so scary. Because they would always air that one around Halloween because it was their scariest episode, I remember. So anyway, in conclusion, I didn't like it. I was disappointed, It was like yet another thing from my childhood ruined. And that seems to be happening a lot. But anyway, this was my review of Are You Afraid of the Dark 2019. And this has been episode 3 of I Just Watched. if you listen to this, tell me in the comments below what your favorite episode is of the original Are You Afraid of the Dark, and what did you think of this new revival that they have made? And did you watch it at all? Tell me in the comments below. And thank you for listening. And happy Halloween. Ha 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 ha. Get it? Laughing in the dark. Ha ha ha. Thanks for listening. Bye.